Hello everyone, this is Grandmaster on Zeman back with the chapter on the move 3 to g6. As we have in the other chapters, we're going to be starting with the move d4. I think that is clear. But after knight f6, knight c3, d5, bishop f4, we have our starting position. And in this chapter, we're going to be analyzing the move g6. Now, this is another position, another chapter, and maybe this is every chapter, where my theoretical sort of knowledge and my opinion of this position has actually changed, and I believe significantly improved through actually making this course. Now, in this sort of the sort of trendy line is, after e3, bishop to g7, is to play the move h4. However, it's not that I dislike the move and that I don't recommend the move. I just feel like within the theme of the course of keeping things as simple as possible, I recommend the move knight to b5. And the recommendation of the move knight to b5 is also consistent with what I've recommended in other move orders. You should take into consideration after e6, I've recommended knight to b5 instead of the move e3, because I firmly believe that from a simplicity perspective and also a human perspective, playing the knight to the move, to the square, not the move, to the square, and creating this dynamic between b5 and a6 and these two knights, I think is really, really great from a practical perspective and forces our opponents just to make some difficult decisions. And I often find this, to have extremely increased results with playing knight b5 instead of h4. So I really felt like it made all the difference. So, I believe that h4 is recommended in Simon Williams' course, and that's probably a move that Simon Williams likes. But for the sake of simplicity and just for the sake of also, I've talked about this a lot throughout the course. We want to train ourselves to play different types of chess, play, different types of positions within the same opening, because it'll train us to sort of develop skills. Like, if you're only able to play like tactical chess, and you don't have any positional understanding, and the only thing you know how to do is sack, and attack, you're going to just sort of stunt your development and your growth as a player. So as tempting as it might be to play the move h4, in this case, knight b5, it's a very simple approach. So after knight to a6, again, this is the only way to protect the pawn. We play the move h3. And the interesting thing is that before making this course, or sort of before fully making this course, when I was in Dubai during the World Championship match and I'd begun my work with Chessable and the Play Magnus group, I had made sort of a baseline of the PGNs, and I had sort of looked through my current files, and I made a PGN file analyzing it, and I would soon realize that the PGNs that I would end up making would be significantly more extensive. And I saw this move h3, and I thought it was just a really great move because it really just sort of ensures that we're going to have this bishop and knight combo, and that there's no knight h5 idea. Because if we play knight f3 immediately, we give our opponents the option to play knight h5. And I really just wanted to keep things as simple as possible and just as direct as possible. So here, there's a few options, right? Our opponents can go for castles. They can go for the immediate c6 push. All of these moves are going to be sort of in different orders, but again, some transposing in specific positions, right? But let's just look at castles first. Knight f3, and the move knight to e4. And this is actually a move that I hope that we're going to be featuring in the model games, and I believe so. I should probably be more confident when I say that. Jobava played this move against me, and it was actually one of the critical games that I won in the last round of a Title Tuesday, and because I won this game, I got first place. So if the Jobava London can beat Jobava in a clutch situation, what other opening is there? And this is sort of one of the more, critical lines. The point is that you want to take away the c3 square for the knight to retreat to. And as mentioned in the annotations, knight e4 is a move before castles as well. There's some interesting transpositions which we're going to get into, but let's look at the main line first. So after castles, knight f3, knight e4, we're going to be playing bishop e2. And the idea is after c6, knight e3, that our opponents want to play queen to a5 and sort of ask themselves, okay, well, I'm going to win. I'm going to, how are you going to defend this, right? You can't really play queen d3 or bishop f5 with a pin or even knight to b4. So we're actually going to be sacrificing this pawn. And after opponents take this pawn, we're going to play the move rook to b1. And we're going to be arguing from a, not a literal perspective. We're not going to like type in the chat during the game and be like, hey, dude, gotcha, buddy. This is my home-cooked, seasoned, salted, marinated preparation. But first of all, you got the open b file, and you've got sort of just awkward development from black. The bishop is sort of tied down to this pawn. Knight on a6 is on the rim and terrible. The bishop is great enough for bishop on g7 is hitting concrete. And the queen is also a little bit awkward, and we have full compensation here. Once the queen moves, we'll have ideas like c4, for example. The queen can come to c1. Again, bishop is just totally stuck, and black really struggles to just find any developing plans here because of how strong this rook is on b1. And again, this is not the first time we're sacrificing a pawn, so I suggest you become comfortable with that fact. And if you're a pawn grubber, that's okay. But this can actually, oh my God, I just had a genius thought. We've talked a lot about the addiction of taking pawns and how serious it is. This is actually the perfect opening for rehab. Because once you sacrifice so many pawns and you crush all your opponents who take your pawns, you can have like an awakening to see the consequences of your actions. Oh my God. This course will be renamed Rehab Center for Pawn Grubbers and Yasser Seirawan's Cult. Okay. Bestseller course right there. Anywho, they can also go c5 to sort of put pressure, but again, we still castle, takes. And we get the same sort of dynamic with the rook coming to b1, but we're not down a pawn. And again, if the bishop develops, the rook can come to b1. It's sort of just awkward, right? The bishops are really strong. The knight is terrible. Even undoubling the pawns or putting extra pressure in the center with c4 is a possibility as well. So that's sort of a critical line, right? Our opponents can also play c5, but I don't even going for immediate central pressure without playing c6 immediately. But when you play c5 before c6, you're sort of just leaving the knight to dominate, So we're just going to simply play a4, bishop e2, keeping things solid. And let's say, captures is a move. Can't really go queen b6 because you could even go a5 and just castle. Knight e5 is a possibility. This knight is just too solid. And I think throughout this course that when we see that this knight on b5 cannot be kicked away, in combination with the bishop is just absolutely dominant. So let's say, captures knight b4, c3, trying to sort of get the knight back. Again, we castle and, black has arguably finished development. But again, our pieces are simply great, right? Like, they can kick the knight out, but then the knight will, again, I've drawn these amazing arrows, which you'll see in the actual move trainer of the course. The knight's just going to come to d3, and the bishop is great on f4. There's not really any pawn breaks, e5 is covered pretty well. And we've got a slight space advantage, slight advantage. We're going to just play chess, slow maneuvering game, right? So in this case, c5 is just a mistake, right? So of course, our opponent should play c3, and then queen b6 is an idea as well. You can't play c5 in this case because bishop takes a6 and d takes c5. You hang this pawn. So queen b6 again. This c6 queen b6 idea is quite common. I'm sure you're going to notice a pattern here. We protect the pawn, and after c5, we're going to play the move bishop to e5, and this is just a great move. And it's just great for so many reasons. First of all, the bishop on e5 controls the diagonal, shutting down any counterplay. It stops any knight e4 ideas because d5 is hanging. It also prepares to take on f6, so you can follow it up with taking on d5. And the bishop on e5 cannot even be challenged because this knight on a6 would have to go b8, then to d7 to even think about challenging the bishop. So it shuts down all counterplay. Controls the crucial diagonal, and next you're going to develop your pieces. If not, even if you taking the knight, and then I've drawn so many arrows you might be getting confused, but I'm threatening to win the d5 pawn, right, by just simply taking away the defender of the knight from the pawn on d5. I need a sip of water. Talking for so long is tough, So let's go back to the sort of crucial position. We've gone through castles. Now, there are a few sort of developmental plans that we should be aware of. But the basic sort of concept is we're just going to be going sort of bishop e2 castles, sort of regardless. Like when our opponents played knight e2, we obviously, again, still played castles and we sacrificed the pawn. But let's say, they try to go bishop f5, then we're going to challenge this bishop immediately with bishop to d3. And obviously our opponents don't want to let us take on f5 and double the pawns, especially doubling these pawns would open up the king. Maybe we'd go for like a g4 break. But after takes, we actually take the opportunity to take with a pawn. And this is another moment sort of where we're going to notice another theme. And a lot of the variations where we would play, let's say in the move chapter where we discussed the move 3, bishop to f5, a lot of the central, we were playing sort of bishop e3 and bishop d3. And the whole, if you remember, we were sort of, the whole point was to provoke our opponent to take this. We wanted to double these pawns so we could open up our queen to sort of play on the queen side. So in this case, the double pawns actually work to our advantage. We're going to castle next. Let's say even c6, the knight retreats. We're going to castle next and simply play queen b3, play on the queen side. And our center pawns are actually quite nice. Another important theme to notice is if they ever try to play like c5, in this position we'll play castle, but we can always sort of just take and then replace the pawn. So our structure is sort of impenetrable because if you ever sort of challenge it, we can always sort of capture and then replace, which is sort of a nice little theme with these doubled pawns. So that's another possibility, but I would say that, again, knight e4 is probably the most critical. And then it's important to know that we're going to sacrifice this pawn and not really be too worried about that. So after h3, you can go for knight e4 immediately. But here we're actually going to go for bishop to d3 to put immediate pressure on this knight. Because in this case, let's say we play like knight f3, c6, then our opponents are sort of in time to play this idea. And if we play like, bishop e2 or bishop d3, then after takes, if we were to recapture it, we can play queen d2 here, which is another variation. But I'm not recommending it, which is why it's not relevant to this course. But if they takes, right, this will come with check. We're not able to castle yet. So we want to play bishop d3 to just sort of capture this knight immediately and try to double these pawns and sort of put, the immediate pressure. So here, c6 is the most logical way to continue, right? Try in theme with this queen a5 idea, or queen b6. But now we actually take on e4, double the pawn to go knight to c3. And again, this is another one of those positions where the computer just gives like total equality, and I just don't understand it, right? Like this knight is bad on a6, doubled pawn, this is weak. But apparently, after queen b6, knight e2, queen takes b2, you actually just go pawn hunting, and everything is okay. But again, everything's not okay. Here we're going to play a4, sort of preventing the queen from, not really preventing the queen from running away, but again, preparing this rook b1 idea. Also, b5 isn't really a possibility. And now again, you're going to recapture the e4 pawn. At some point, you're going to castle, and even this is just sort of not a practical way for black to play whatsoever. But still, I think you should know the sort of themes, right? If the queen's stuck, right, here, then you could even just castle, right, and ignore this pawn and take it whenever you see fit, right? It's not really going anywhere. So this is sort of one of the weirder lines that I can discuss, right? Let's say castles first, you go knight e2 and then c6, and then now that you take, and now it would be basically this position after c6. Let's say if our opponent's castled here, which is obviously not as concrete. So after knight e2 here, and after you take, now queen b6, you can simply defend it, right? and you still maintain the pressure on the e4 pawn, which will eventually fall. Let's say you were to play like f5, still we'd follow it up with h4. We have a great sort of dark square bind here, preparing h5 to sort of tenderize. I think this is my favorite word. I don't even know if it's a word to put suppression on the king side. Again, the knight is still terrible, and maybe the knight can come to f4 as well. So there's plenty of sort of ideas here that are very thematic. So there's a few different ways that things can approach, right? What we should note also, c6 is another sort of order, and then followed by queen a5 immediately, trying to go for this knight e4 idea. In this case, we're again going to play bishop d3 to stop knight e4, and then they can go for c5. This is sort of a very, very direct way to go at us, but then we're going to take on a6 now. And you might wonder, I think when the beta testing, one of the questions was like, why not, if we're going to play bishop d3, c5, and then take, why not just take immediately? Well, the point is after bishop d3, if our opponents want to stop us from, playing knight f3 and castles and just finishing development, then they have to go, for something very concrete. But now after bishop takes, you can't really play queen takes because of d takes. Obviously, the best move is still to play queen takes, and we'll discuss pawn takes as well. But now you sort of take, you're able to take the pawn, right? So you're provoking this move, sometimes giving your opponent an extra move when it's a move that benefits you is actually positive. So in this case, after castles, again, bishop e5, this thematic idea we mentioned before, controlling the diagonal, again, putting pressure on d5, also can be a protection of b2, sort of indirectly, as we're going to see after b6. It's critical to sort of open things up. And after pawn takes, queen takes, play rook b1, protecting the pawn. We're going to finish development and sort of just beat up a pawn. Black does have pretty solid compensation here, but I would say that white still has the advantage just because of the extra pawn. And if you're able to castle, the extra pawn will certainly be very pleasant for white to play with. So there's also pawn takes e6, bishop e5, again, shutting things down. The structure is ruined. And again, you're just going to continue with development. This bishop on c8 is really just terrible because it doesn't really have a great square. a6 would be great to go to, but it's just sort of stuck. You might take this pawn away if you could. And again, after the bishop on g7 is just dominated by the bishop on e5, and double pawns, in combination with white's central control really gives white a nice advantage here. So this is sort of one of the direct ways that you can sort of approach things. But I think from a conceptual perspective, you might wonder, from h3, let's just say from a fundamental perspective, from having sort of h3 with the bishop on this long diagonal controlling the position in combination with this bad knight, from a fundamental perspective, if everything just sort of takes a natural course and natural development happens, then white's going to have a very nice advantage just due to the positional side of things, right? Of having this bad knight and having this great bishop and normal, very natural development. So you can think about it this way, right? From a fundamental perspective, we're establishing sort of trumps and things that work to our advantage. And we're forcing our opponents to take immediate and extremely precise action to challenge those. And that just for any human, even a very strong player, is very difficult. And I think that's what encapsulates the strength of this opening especially, and why this opening, I believe, has not been popular at the top level in a very long time. I'm going to be repopularizing it. And I've played this against so many strong players in top level events and had great results. I think my game against Duda is probably the best game of my life. And it was in the opening and using a novelty that I had discovered, right? So I'll probably mention this Duda game too many times throughout this course, just to humble brag. But I do really, I'm really proud of that game. So I say G6 is probably one of the chapters where there's not that many concrete lines. I think it's, if I were to recommend the move H4 with after bishop b7, if I was going to things get really complex and this wouldn't be that easy. But I think when I'm recommending knight b5 in the main line, things just become a lot simpler. So I think we discussed the main variations arising after bishop g7. So c6 is another idea which doesn't make that much sense, but it's still sort of popular. Another reason why I've chose to include c6 here is that you're going to notice that there's a chapter regarding 3c6. But the reason why this chapter is just ridiculously small is because after e3, bishop f5, or g6, they're all simply transpositions. So c6 is actually just extremely simple to play against. You're just going to play h3, bishop e7, knight f3. And this sort of waste of a tempo with c6 means you're under no direct pressure and you can simply complete development naturally. We're going to play bishop to e2. Okay, they can go b5 first. You can also go knight d7 followed by b5. b5 is sort of nice to make sure that we don't play a4. But here we can take some concrete measures. Anyways, let's look at knight b7 first. And the crucial point is to play a4 to stop b5 and to sort of take space on the queen side. And now we go castles, bishop b7, and we have a very nice idea, a5. The point being is we're trying to provoke our opponent to take an a5 to sort of rupture their pawn structure. And also a6 is an idea. So in this case, if they try to play b5 pushing past, we're actually going to play a6. Sorry, we're going to play b4. I love it. I love it. It's great. Move trainer, guys. Move trainer. And actually, this position from a conceptual point is actually beautiful because we've locked this entire structure. We've stopped c5 forever. And the simple question is, we're going to ask, what's our worst piece, right? The knight on c3. We're going to go knight a2, knight c1, knight d3 to cover e5 and target c5. And there's absolutely nothing our opponents can do because we are covering e5 with 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces. Absolutely dominating. We're forcing our opponents to be so passive. So this is sort of a really nice concept. Okay, I accidentally clicked out of that. Let's go back to c6. Sorry. Yeah, so c6 is not a challenge at all. There's b5 immediately, and the point is we're going to play castles here. And this is an interesting nuance. So in this case, there's a5 and knight to b7, and we're actually going to be reacting differently in each case. So I think shout out to the beta testers because a lot of the suggestions you added were really, really great. Someone asked at a5, we're actually going to play the move a3 instead of a4. And I added this as a note. The point is after a4, b4, knight a2, let's just keep a mental note of this position and go back to knight to d7. After knight d7, when we play the move a4, b4, knight a2, we should know that this comes with a tempo, right? This pawn is immediately attacked and our opponents are forced to play a5. After which our point is to play c3, pawn takes c3, and knight takes c3. And we're going to be essentially targeting the c6 weakness and sort of doubling and playing on the c file. Now, that is sort of our theme, right? But if they play a5 immediately, and then we try to go for a4, b4, knight a2, now that they see that our idea is to play a4, and knight a2, they're already prepared with a5, and they can respond with like a move like bishop a6. Like knight d7 is not a move that you want to play in response to the c3 idea because the c6 pawn is the weakness. So knight on b8, actually better on b8, protecting that c6 pawn. And now black can equalize very easily after bishop a6, c3, pawn takes, knight takes, and you can just sort of take this as well. You can also just sort of play queen b6. There's a normal move, but that on b8 is actually just better on b8. And in this case, after a5, we're going to just play a3. After knight d7, we're actually going to go bishop d3. Point being, we're going to break with e4. Or we're going to try to break with e4, but we can also sort of aim to just bring the knight to e2. And another interesting point that we should note is that chess is a game of psyching your opponent out, trying to see where the ideas are going. In this case, let's say in the position with knight d7, b6, the whole point of their idea is to play c5, right? However, once we can, if we can find a way to stop their pawn break and activity, then we have an advantage. So going back to this position after b5, once we have provoked a5, This means that any time they play c5, this b5 pawn is going to be weak, which means that it's important for us. Then we can sort of shift gears and play on the king side now that c5 isn't a possibility. So after knight d7, bishop b3, we're keeping the e4 break as a possibility, but we're also keeping the idea of just play knight e2, and c5 isn't going to be a major issue because b5 is always a target. So this is some nice, positional nuance that you should be aware of in this specific c6 variation. And there's also the move knight h5, really trying to go for this bishop, but in this case we can go bishop to g5. And now the best move for black is to play c6. It's also the most natural move by far, right? Just to consolidate things. Now we go bishop e2, f6, bishop here, knight g7. Black is taking some extreme measures just to get this bishop because they know how powerful it is. We simply play knight f3, knight f5, bishop g3. If you want to take this bishop, take this bishop. It's your only chance to take my bishop. But now I've got all my pieces developed. I've got an open rook, and I've got plenty of initiative. So, you've taken the bishop at what cost, right? The queen can come to d3, maybe some rook h7 threats, maybe e4, castles queenside. You've got a great initiative. Who cares about the bishop pair? Because the bishop pair doesn't mean anything when your king's in the center and you've got no development, right? So, let's say if you were to go like, bishop g7, it would just defeat the entire purpose, right? It would just end up going back and losing time and not taking this bishop, right? So c6, f6 is the only way to really take this bishop. So if you really care about this bishop and you never want to trade it, I'm sorry, this is one variation where you're going to have to part with it, but I promise you that you'll be, compensated properly. So just to summarize, I think the main themes here, of course, in the main lines, we're going to be going for knight to b5, and a lot of the themes that you might see there might remind you of the e6 chapter, move 3 e6, and the dynamics and provoking the knight to a6 and just having a positional edge. And we'll also see that if our opponent sort of tries to go for really concrete attacks, we're gonna sacrifice a pawn, and we're willing to sort of sacrifice material, like in this specific line we can note rook b1. We're willing to sacrifice a pawn, and again, activity development is key throughout this specific position, and we're just going for absolute simplicity, and we're going to take a more positional route here. So things might not be as flashy, but they're definitely going to be. It's a way to ensure good results because you're taking a very small amount of risk and just playing chess and basically guaranteed to get just a comfortable position that you're more familiar with than your opponent. So thank you guys for watching the chapter on the move 3 g6. I hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to the next one.